Hi everyone, Deacon Ed McCormick here on this beautiful evening. I'd like to share with you two insights that I have had recently regarding this coming Sunday's gospel. This Sunday we hear about magi from the east following a star that takes them to Jerusalem. And they approach the castle of King Herod asking where the newborn king of the Jews is, because they think this star indicates that a new king, a new Jewish king, is about to be born. And Herod and the Jewish leadership consult the scriptures, and we hear about two passages that help them. One is from Micah, and one is from Ezekiel. The magi head off to Bethlehem, where they bring to Jesus gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and they worship him. So here's the first thing I want to say about this passage. Matthew stuffs it with these Old Testament references that we would miss unless we're attuned to them. And these references are telling us something very important about who Jesus is and what he means for us. So let me first say a word about what these references are. The first one comes from the book of Numbers in the Old Testament, chapters 22 to 24. In these chapters, the Israelites are coming through the desert, they're heading to the promised land, and they are approaching the land of the Moabites. And the Moabite king calls his astrologer, his magi, and asks him to produce a curse against Israel. But this magi, Balaam, is overcome by the Spirit of God, and instead of cursing Israel, he blesses them by saying, "I see the star of Judah rising." And this is taken to be a reference to the rise of the Davidic monarchy in Jerusalem, where King David eventually establishes his castle and the temple. So that's the first reference. Here's the second one. In Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, chapter 60, he has this fabulous poetic image of the earth surrounded by darkness and a dark cloud. But over Jerusalem one day, suddenly the glory and beauty of God breaks through. And all of a sudden, the clouds part and there's this blue sky, and the light and glory of God shines on Jerusalem. And all humanity comes streaming towards her, because she is the place where God's freedom from darkness, God's light and God's beauty are to be found. And in this passage, Isaiah describes kings coming to Jerusalem, bringing gold and incense. The two other passages I've already hinted at that Matthew references. The first is from the prophet Micah, where he says that from you, Bethlehem, shall come a leader to rule Israel and the nations. And this is another reference to the Davidic monarchy. But then Matthew attaches to that passage a quote from the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 34, where Ezekiel has God say, "I'm going to fire all the kings of Israel, and I will be Israel's king. I will shepherd my people." So Matthew takes those four references, those four Old Testament references, and uses them to talk about who the child Jesus is. And here's what's interesting. All those references are associated with Jerusalem. It's in Jerusalem where the Davidic monarchy will be. It's in Jerusalem where God's glory will come. It's in Jerusalem where this leader will rise up and lead the world. It's from Jerusalem that God will shepherd God's people. And Matthew, in effect, moves these promises 5 miles south to Bethlehem, and is saying, and of pointing with the book of Numbers and Isaiah and Micah and Ezekiel, saying, no, it's in Jesus that the Davidic Messiah will be fulfilled in Jesus. Jesus will be the leader of Israel and of God's people. Upon him will come God's beauty and glory. He will be the one who will free the world from darkness. And this is why the Magi are attracted to him. This is why they bring their gifts. And this leads me to the second point that I want to share with you. In our St. John the Baptist men's group this morning, a couple of the guys were wondering how long it took for the Magi to get to Jesus. And I said, you know, the issue is not how long it took the Magi to get to Jesus. The real interesting journey for Matthew's gospel, for St. Paul, was the journey that he watched Gentile pagans take from worshiping Jupiter and Apollo and Zeus and worshiping the Roman emperors to worshiping Jesus. This journey from non-belief to belief in Jesus, this journey from indifference or hostility to Jesus to worshiping Jesus. This is the great journey that the Magi symbolize for us. These are figures that symbolize how we are being called and led to devote ourselves to Jesus. It is so easy to worship appearance and success and power. It's so easy to worship and desire attention. It's so easy to worship riches and wealth and security. But none of those idols can fill us with the joy and the meaning and the real thing that we long for, which can only be found in Jesus. So my friends, I encourage you as we continue in the Christmas season to see yourself as the Magi, drawn and attracted to Jesus, to give yourself to him, to worship him, so that you can take in his life and become new people. Merry Christmas, everybody.